you ready for a high action, high octane, high fantasy TTRPG you are bound to enjoy? Stay with us as we review Soulbound by Cubicle 7. Hello and welcome to Fly Like a D6, a tabletop role-playing game review show. If you like what we do here at Fly Like a D6, then please hit that like and subscribe buttons and that notification bell so you can be notified every time we put out a new video. Keep an eye out for our shorts, where we put out quick videos, shorts, showing a variety of TTRPGs, a lot of which we'll review as we continue. So hit that like and subscribe and get notified as to when those videos will be coming out. Today we're going to be looking at the Cubicle 7 Warhammer-based Warhammer Age of Sigmar Soulbound TTRPG. This TTRPG is high fantasy, high action, high octane bombastic set pieces, good for one-shots, short campaigns, or a longer campaign depending on your needs and your desires. The Soulbound TTRPG is a D6 dice pool system, more of which we'll get onto when we get to character creation and sort of the basics of the game as we go through. Soulbound is set in the Warhammer fantasy setting of the Age of Sigmar. This is different to the Warhammer fantasy roleplay game, which is set in a different timeline and also different from both the Wrath and Glory TTRPG by Cubicle 7, which is the Warhammer 40k setting, and the new one, Imperium Maledictum, which is a D100 system used for investigation and mystery and suspenseful gameplay at a lower level, being that you are humans or you are squishy in that system. And again, that is set in the 40k universe. In Soulbound, however, you are the chosen representatives, agents, heroes of the gods. And I say gods, not god, because of the Pantheon and a few other supplements that have been released that allow you to play on different sides of the fence, as it were. So, a brief overview then. The Soulbound RPG exists in a world of the mortal realms. The realms are Azir, the realm of heaven, Akshi, the realm of fire, Shaman, the realm of metal, Gur, the realm of beasts, Giran, the realm of life, Hish, the realm of light, Shyish, the realm of death, and Olgu, the realm of shadow. Now, if you pick up, for example, the starter set, which I have here, then it comes with a beautiful map and a few other useful pieces of information for playing in the setting. One of those is the map, the Great Parch. Now, the starter set focuses very much down on that, but the Great Parch has many of the iconic settings of the mortal realms, civilizations and cities such as Brightspear, Anvilgard, Greywater Fastness. Those names will come back up later in this review. So we will spin through what has been released so far for the TTRPG Soulbound, and then how you can incorporate them into your games and what it is you want to do with the system. As I said, it is a D6 dice pool system, so ordinary D6. These, which came with the starter set, have a special symbol on the 6, but unlike Wrath and Glory that requires a Wrath dice to change certain outcomes in the way the game is being played, this just relies on the dice pool. So if you've got some D6s and you want that high level, high octane equivalent to a level 20 character in a D20 system, then this is the game for you. It is absolutely hardcore in respect that you are tough as nails characters. You may not be the best of each culture that you have been pulled from, but you are at the peak of your abilities when you are bound into this. The only exception to that, which we'll get onto, are the Stormcast Eternals, who are souls captured almost and then reforged into living weapons. And every time they die, they are reforged back into living weapons. And each time they get through this reforged process, they lose a little bit of themselves. So there's a real sort of story and character arc as little pieces of ourselves slip away if we were to play one of these Stormcast Eternals. So outside of the core rulebook, which is approaching 300 pages long, dense with information, archetypes, miracles and equipment and sort of lore on the setting and all the sort of good things that can really bed in your players' minds what this game and what this world and realms means to you as a player character. Alongside that, there was a bestiary. So everyone loves more monsters. That's why there are a plethora of extra releases for our favourite and most popular role-playing games out there. You can go on places like Drive-Thru and the DM's Guild and other places, itch.io for example, and people are selling additional monsters to a variety of games. It's always nice to see the publishers release their own, and again a weighty tome that breaks down into sections different threats you may come up against. So Skaven and some chaos and some other demons and beasts and things like that. So that's the bestiary. If from the core rules you find your choices are too limited for you, or you want to really sort of drill down into one location or have a particular build that leans into the order that Sigmar has tried to create with his Soulbound groups, then the Champions of Order is for you. It's a relatively short book, however it is still packed with suggestions on how to roleplay characters from a number of different locations, introduces new options, new archetypes as it says, spells and so many other great things. So one to pick up if you want to focus on an order-aligned group. Moving on from there, Champions of Death. As I said before, playing multiple sides of the fence, even though there should be both or two, there are other options coming that we will see. Champions of Death. So if you want to play a character who has died, if you want to play a character who works for Nagash, who is the Undying King, the great necromancer in Shyish, one of the realms mentioned, the realms of death. If you want to be one of their agents, so you can work for them unwittingly or completely voluntarily, and that can be to achieve their goals or to achieve your own goals within the remit of being dead. Things to recover, for example. This book has it and it lays out beautifully. You can be ghouls, you can be night haunts, you can be gravelord, vampires, you can be Ossiarchs, and so many other options that just the cover itself sort of shows you really what you're opening yourselves up to. And it is beautifully written, beautifully stylized. For example, I have the books we're about to mention on the table behind me. You can see the core rulebook sat up, and then you've got Order, Death, and the third one, which we'll get to in a moment. So, Death. It opens up new areas. Instead of going into Brightspear to maintain order, maybe you go into Brightspear into the Undercity and retrieve an item. It's an option. Wherever your good aligned party may have taken one stance, your Champions of Death may take the opposite. We'll leave that up to the GM and the group in their session 0. But what if order and death isn't enough? Well, to counteract order, there is destruction. Chaos is a book which is coming as far as I'm aware. But for now, order, death, and destruction. So if you want to be that Orc you've always sort of dreamed of being, if you want to be one of the goblins, if you want to be a loon boss, for example, or sort of a troll, or any of those sort of more destructive archetypes, then this is the book for you. And again, you don't need each of these books. If you had the core rule book and you just wanted to run a high fantasy, high powered, high impact game, short, sharp, punchy, boom, 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 really sort of mixing it up against swarms and minions, and then taking on and taking down big beasts or tyrants or anything like that, the core rulebook will fulfill that. These are more for flavorings. These are for leaning into those niche games that you as groups want to run. To narrow that niche even further, we can bring in the Seraphon. So if you want to be a skink, if you want to be a Saurus, if you want to be aligned to the stars with that celestial connection, or if you want to be sort of earth bonded in that respect, Stars and Scales, a supplement available from the website, has you covered. Not only does it have extra weapons, it has the archetypes and some story links and story campaigns in there, including some exciting one-page adventures. Well worth picking up if you want to sort of dive into that side of stuff. Nothing stops your binding, sort of mixing a number of these different sort of groups. The Seraphon would sort of lean more into the order, but if you wanted one to have been reborn or want to achieve something with a Wa, for example, you pick up the Destruction book. If you want them to achieve something through resurrection or a reconnection to an ancestor or something, you could put them in with a dead campaign. There's a lot of freedom to mix and match here. Take some balance, and some of the mechanics sort of lean into the specific books of death or destruction. But you can certainly do it, and it doesn't take much effort. Now, we've spoken a lot about archetypes and the D6 dice pool system and all those sorts of good things. So how do you make a character? How does a character come to life in this respect? We need to get ourselves a character sheet, and we need to sort of work our way down through it. And the book guides this very, very well. So you pick your archetype, which is laid out in the books, various books, depending on which one you pick from. You pick yourself an archetype. Pick the one that sort of really resonates with you, really vibes with you and what you want to get out of the game. You can pick a species. So we have human, Duarden, elves, and a few others that sort of come up through the books. And again, if you pick up the Book of Death or the Book of Destruction, you are then offered these different species as a way to go. Moving down, your character name, personal preference on that one, but there is inspiration in the books. You have your three sort of core stats: body, mind, and soul. So your body will relate to the physical, your mind to the mental, and your soul to stop corruption most of the time. So sort of the more spiritual side of the game. And alongside that, you've got your skills. So as the skills break down, you've got things like Arcana, Ballistic skill, Guile, Weapon skill. Weapon skill will come up a lot because of the way this game is designed to be played. So to achieve an action, you pick the core skill, you pick the core attribute and then the skill that you feel is associated with it. There'll be a number in each. So if we want to swing our weapon, we would take the number of dice from the body skill and the number of dice in the weapon skill, and we will roll that as our pool. And the outcome from that is something we will get to as we move down the character sheet. Next sort of section, so we've got goals. What does your character want to achieve in the short term? What do they want to achieve in the long term? So leveling in this game is done mainly by sort of XP nudges. Effectively, your characters take on new feats, if we were to compare this to other games, new talents, new abilities. You don't go from, in comparison to a D20 system, from level 1 to level 20, because you are those level 20 characters. You are titans of the god's making, regardless of which god to put your binding together. You are sort of at their behest the best you can be. This just fine-tunes your greatness, allows you to have an even bigger impact on the battlefield or in the fight arena, because that's what this game really does really well. So what do you want to achieve? Your goals. Who have you met? Who is important? Who are you looking for? Connections. How can they be used? How can they be leveraged or manipulated? How can they sort of trust and be trusted by you? Talents there on the right hand side is what your character is specialized at. So you might have the best body and weapon skill, but your talent will dictate just how much of a weapon you are. Now, this game allows sort of movement through zonal sort of combat. It doesn't rely on, although there are rules for it available as optional rules, it doesn't rely on the sort of the 5-foot increments that other systems do. It uses zonal, so you can move within your current zone unopposed, and if you cross into the next zone, you're then using your movement. On that, ranges go from close to long and sort of a few in between with respect to how far your weapon or your reach or blast radius and things like that go into. So being able to move around freely means that there are no attacks of opportunity or opportunity attacks, depending on the system you've run in the past, unless you take the talent or have the talent opportunistic. Outside of that, you are able to step out of combat because you are that skilled, and you are able to move around the battlefield in your zone or beyond without sort of this sort of bogged down, do I hit, do I not hit, who hits who, what's going on. You are in and out. You are racing into combat, and you are shifting and moving, and if your character has fly, you can go from fly to run with grace, almost, depending on the form you have taken, your archetype and species, and so on and so forth. So that's where talents sort of come in. Combat abilities. So on the left-hand side, you've got 3 columns ranging from extraordinary down to poor. Once you've gone through the character creation process, you will mark against a number system where on those columns you come. So if you are more of a melee character, your melee should be higher up on into the good or great area. Your ranged will be lower because you haven't focused on that. So your defense all depends on if you have a shield or armor and all that sort of good stuff. So that can dictate how difficult it is to get hit yourself. In the middle, there is the attack difficulty number. Now, I mentioned before grabbing a pool of dice. So if we were to swing our Warhammer, for example, we'd use our body skill and our weapon skill. So a number of dice from there would be, for example, 3 body skill, 2 weapon skill, so 5 dice. The standard difficulty number is 4, so you have to achieve a number 4 on 1 dice and have to achieve it at least once. So 1 die has to get 4 or above. Now, this difficulty scales with your opponent. So if you are mightier, then that number could come down to a 3 or a 2. If they are mightier in their defense, that number then makes it harder, so that could become a 4, 5, or even a 6. If you have advantage or disadvantage, it twists that pool as well. So advantage lowers that number 1 step, so that 4 becomes a 3. So roll a 3 on in your pool of dice, and you have struck the target. Any other 3s and above after that, we'll get to in a moment. If you have disadvantage, that number goes from a 4, for example, up to a 5, because you have disadvantage, and therefore it is more difficult to connect with the target. Next to that is initiative. This is a static number generated during your character creation. It allows a quick and snappy look for yourselves and your GM to know even if there's no one else involved, which wouldn't make much of a fight, but even if there's not, you get an idea of who you're ahead of and who you're behind. And that can change slightly with talents or certain Urgold, things that the Duarden Fire Slayers can take, but generally it's a static number. So that helps sort of structure combat in a lot quicker fashion than rolling off each time. And again, there is the option to roll each time, but that is an optional rule. Underneath that is your armor. So how much armor you have on, how much damage you soak up before it starts attacking your toughness. And we'll get to toughness in a second. So armor is sort of, there's many levels of armor. They give you a static number. If that gets attacked with a weapon that has rend, then you lose a point of armor until your armor is destroyed. Once that armor is destroyed, you would need to take it to a smithy and they would repair it, and that would be a downtime activity if you really had to have that specific armor and couldn't afford to go and buy more or acquire some somehow. Above to the right is metal. Now metal is an interesting concept because it allows you to take extra actions, a bit like in other systems would use inspiration or extra attack. This is a de facto gift you have been given by the gods. So it doesn't matter which god you've come from, you will have metal. Which means if you have used your move action and swung your sword, for example, and you've missed, you can spend that metal to swing again, to really lay into the enemy. And it has other functions and things we'll get onto shortly. Beneath that is your toughness. So this is how tough you actually are. Under that armor, you still have a form that needs protecting, that will take damage. And once your toughness, once that grit and determination has been taken down to 0, you will start incurring wounds. Now, the wound track on that right-hand side will be capped off at a number depending on choices made during your character creation process. And you will step down. So if you have 0 toughness and you take light damage effectively, you will get a minor wound and you'll mark 1. If you take a major wound, you'll mark 2, and it will continue down that track until you are mortally wounded and start making death saves. Now there is a certain amount of healing and there are ways to heal, but this game is based around hitting hard, going in fast, and sort of striking while the iron is hot. There are options for stealth, and they are not to be dismissed or ignored or underlined. But even within those stealth mechanics, the game is designed to drive you into the action. If you are moving from shadow to shadow to shadow, the game wants you to move shadow to shadow to shadow. It doesn't want you to sort of bog down and sneak from one and then wait and possibly roll again and all that sort of stuff. This game has the narrative flexibility with the dice pool system to say, you've rolled once, this is where you're going, this is how it looks. It's not quite powered by the Apocalypse or other similar systems forged in the dark in that respect, but the narrative and the structure is there to really allow that free narrative gameplay style. Beneath the combat abilities are your attacks. So if you have if you've specialized in close combat, for example, and you have a sword, then your sword will be there. Next to it will be the pool of dice you roll for your sword. So that's derived from your body and weapon skill, for example. Focus is, so next to each of the skills, there's 3 square boxes and 3 diamonds. The square boxes indicate how many extra dice you put into your dice pool. The diamonds indicate how much focus you have. Basically a mental resilience to use that weapon. So your focus, if you have one of the stars coloured in or marked, is a +1. So any of your dice that fall a number short, you can boost that number up by 1. If you have 2, you can boost one number by 2 or 2 numbers by 1. Again, allowing that flexibility to help boost your score up and really sort of hit home against multiple enemies as you move through the battlefield making these strikes. Range weapons exactly the same, and sort of so on and so forth. Damage is normally 1 plus S or 2 plus S, where S stands for successes. As I said before, if the static difficulty number was 4 to 1, so you had to roll 4 on a single dice, every other 4 and above you roll then totes into your damage pool. So 1 plus successes, damage on a 5d6 dice pool with focus would be 1 plus, and then if you got 4 and above on all 5, then it would be 6, and you would do damage 6, and that would go through the armor, if the opponent was wearing any, through their toughness, and defeat them. The second part of the character sheet is more around information, as you would in other systems. So, can you draw a picture? If not, can you find a picture? If you can find a picture, slap it there to give you that inspiration. This is your character. Derive that inspiration from that picture. Background. Unlike other systems where you start low levels and you have lived and sort of, and you know, you've got several ways of presenting a low level character's backstory. Some people want to have lived a full life before they had started adventuring. Some people are new to adventuring and things like that. In this system, you've lived a life. You've been selected to come back at your peak to form this binding, this soul-bound group that you have. So you have done things, especially as a Stormcast Eternal. Your memories, your connections, your previous experiences all tie into who you are. How many times have you been resurrected in that respect? For other characters, where have you come from? What did you do? You are allowed to expand on a backstory here. The caveat to that is most of these are designed for short, one-shot to short campaign sort of running games. So, yes, having that glamorous, all expenses or no expense spared backstory would be fantastic. It's then trying not to lose yourself in the backstory while trying to be in the action and in amongst the reality that your character is in now. Next to that is notes. I think that's self-explanatory. Equipment. Some equipment gives you mechanical benefits, armor, and a few other things. And other than that, it is cosmetic. Look how you want to look. Has your GM gifted you things? Have you been paid in material and cloth that you can turn into new items of clothing to really stand out and either look imposing or look incognito? Maybe you want to pass under the radar. There are options. Other gear. So each character within the character system, and we'll get onto them soon, will come with a list of gear that's applicable to them. That's where you put it. There's some currency. So the currency in Age of Sigmar Soulbound is a magical liquid. And it comes in drops, so the smallest of sort of denominations, vials and spheres. Spheres being the most amount you would hand over in one, and then vials and drops you would pay out as required. This currency can also be drank for healing properties. So it is a currency, it is a medicine, but once it's gone, it's gone. And at the bottom there, spells and miracles. So if you're not a spellcaster, then that doesn't mean you can't have some sort of magical ability. Especially Stormcast Eternals, for example. And I keep coming back to them, but they are iconic. So certain Stormcast Eternals have miracles. They can be blessed. And other characters can also be blessed by a certain deity, giving them a mechanical use for this sort of devotion. And that can be impacted on the self or allies or the zone. And some can be very useful to aid the party, and some can be very destructive just for everybody. So reading through and understanding what they're for is a lot of fun. Spellcasting is for spellcasters and can be sort of made up of the spell's name, the difficulty or the cost, because you may need to pay metal For example, does it target you? Does it target someone else? Does it target a specific person or thing? What range is it? Is it close, short, medium, long? How long does it last? Is it that turn? Is it instantaneous? Or is it every so often? Do you need to spend metal to maintain it? That's another use for metal. And then effect. What does it actually do? Both thematically and mechanically. What does the spell do? So the party sheet. So this is a great system used by other games as well. The party sheet is a bit like a patron sheet if you're adventuring in Eberron for a D&D conversion, and a few other systems use sort of the patron or the crew tag. City of Mist is another one. And so party name, who's in it? The use of Soulfire. So Soulfire you can use to maximize successes. You can spend Soulfire before making a test to give yourself the maximum successes possible. Each die in the pool is considered a 6. So if you really need to hit, and you really need to hit hard, and you've got a big dice pool to roll, then with the permission of the group, and I say that for a very good reason, you can use Soulfire. You can also use it to re-roll as many dice as you like. Instead of taking a second turn and having another go, you could use Soulfire to redo this one, a divine intervention, and still have your use of your metal. You could regain metal. Now, that would be more pertinent if you were using metal as a limited resource. You can recover toughness. So as an action, you can spend Soulfire to recover all of your toughness. An instant boost, bringing you back up to full health, ready to stay in the fight. Or you could cheat death. So you can choose a mortally wounded ally within close range, including yourself, and spend Soulfire. The ally is no longer mortally wounded, recovers half their toughness, and retains any wounds they suffered. So if you need them back on their feet, and you need them back soon, then you can spend Soulfire. You haven't completely cured them, but you've got them back in the fight, or you're able to get them out of the way of danger. And there's a lot of things in this game, in this world, in these realms, that will take down an injured player. Injured player character. So, for reference, this is all on the back of or on the inside of the GM screen. It's got this beautiful artwork. I'll show you that last paint there. And on the inside, there's some really, really useful information. Also, there are mentioned goals before. So what are the parties, what's the Soulbound group's short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? Who are your allies? Who are your enemies? What rumours have you heard? So rumours, fears and threats is a clever 3-stage approach to storytelling that the GM can use and the characters can use to make decisions on what they're doing in their game. Rumours. You have been made aware that strange noises are happening somewhere in the city. Fears. People have noticed clumps of fur. People have noticed things are going missing. There was a strange new smell and something emanating out from the sewer grates. So the rumour is becoming real. The fear. People are becoming aware of it. And it's starting to become a threat. And at the point of a threat, it could be in Brightspear. There is a full-blown Skaven infestation just below the city and the sewers and the old city, ready to burst out and into the streets. No longer is it a rumour. No longer are people thinking they hear or potentially hearing strange noises down in the city, in the old city, down in the sewers. No longer are they seeing sort of glimpses of something or nothing and seeing this strange miasma potentially or energy being emanated from below. Now they can see it. Now it's a threat to the city. And if you are there to deal with it, brilliant. If you have decided to follow other rumours, fears and threats, then this city is in trouble. And whether you get there or not, this is how the GM can put emotional weight on your decisions and choices. And it allows flexibility. It allows choices with real consequences. Because these are similar in a way to the clock system in Blades in the Dark. They will tick up. And once they're full, once they've gone through the rumours, fears, and into the threats, something bad happens. And whether the city guard or other heroes step in to quell this Skaven infestation, for example, and you weren't, maybe you'll lose reputation. Maybe you swoop in at the last minute and claim the victory. But maybe you don't. So that is where the rumours, fears, and threats come in. Across the bottom, you can see Doom. Doom always starts at 1. There is always a low-level sense of dread in the world. There has been the age of chaos and the Necroquake. How well you know the Warhammer fantasy lore, and these books cover them right through, depends on how chaotic a time it really is. Every time you make a decision against the party, Doom increases. Every time you flee on your own, Doom increases. Everything that calls into question the group's motives, Doom can increase. So it's a good narrative way. And it's not just there for a number. Unlike the rumours, fears and threats that increment through and show on a grander scale the situation deteriorating, Doom has a very real mechanical impact on certain creatures, threats and monsters who are tied to the Doom. So the higher that Doom number, the stronger they become. The higher that Doom number, the stronger they become. I said that twice just to emphasize the fact that this has a very real mechanical bonus on the GM's monsters. And if you drive that threat up through your action or inaction, you are creating your own problems. You can lower Doom, but you will never eliminate it completely. So creating a character, sort of flicking through very quickly. In that respect, there is a freeform option where it throws 8 XP at you, but to use the sort of the structured approach, you choose your archetype, you go through your attributes, choose your skills and talents, add in the details. So, all the things that make your character your character. Build the party, and then bringing your character to life, and that's followed by the finishing touches. So, archetype, attributes, skills and talents, equipment was the one I missed, adding detail, then the party, then bringing your character to life, and finally finishing touches. So this is Velaturius. This is a pre-gen character from the starter set. So the starter set, which is brilliant, as I've said before, comes with 2 books. It comes with the Brightspear City Guide. It has a map of the city of Brightspear on the back. And it also comes with an adventure based there, which is Faltering Light. So in here, there's a step-by-step guide on how to play, as you would expect from a starter guide adventure. So Velaturius is from there, and so we can see that their archetype is filled out. So the information across the top, their attributes, their skills, you can see that they have. So to swing their Quest of Warblade, they would have a body skill of 4, a weapon skill of 1, so that's a 5d6 dice pool. And then they have a focus of +1, so they can increment the number on one of those dice by a single number. And then the damage is 1, so you'll always do a flat damage of 1, plus any successes, so up to 6 damage. And then they have talents there in the middle. They have 5 wounds before they are mortally wounded. They have 2 metal available. They have armor of 3, so the first 3 points of damage will be taken by their armor. Anything after that will take off from that 9, and that 9 will decrement, decrease, until it hits 0, and then we start marking wounds. Now, Stormcast Eternal, I've mentioned before, if they are mortally wounded and die, they then return to Azir to be reformed and reforged on the anvil so they can return to the battle, but they lose a piece of themselves. And this sort of reforging, it's not instantaneous. It's down to the GM's discretion. That's something they would chat with the player before the game, but it could be a number of hours, a number of days, a number of weeks before that character comes back. This system is good with time. Because it focuses on action, you're allowed to do some downtime activities and do what is needed, and certain characters have specific ones, but you can skip in time pretty simply, doing the Indiana Jones trick where you just follow the blimp or the plane across the map, or the ship around the coast and all that sort of stuff. You don't have to play out every minute if you don't want to. Travel can be exciting, especially going through Auric-infested swampland. If you want some inspiration, have a look in Champions of Destruction. Or it can just be point A to point B. You were here, you're now there. But this has happened. Have you had any discussions? You move on. Have you rested? We move on. So this is from Champions of Death. This is Varcosia the Deposed. So a different take on it. Again, her attributes focus on the mind, and she has channeling for spell casting, and she also has a weapon skill. And you can see as we scroll down, she also has 5 wounds. She's got some short-term goals. She's got a slightly different sheet because these are pre-gens. She's got some quotes that she can use to sound badass. She's got a background. She's got some secrets. She's got some gear with her, and the number of spells and miracles there available to the player is fantastic. It gives that narrative and mechanical flexibility when in the heat of the battle as to what Varcosia can do. So, mentioned archetype. Here's an example of one. The Knight Questor. Like Velatorius, we can see that they get the main attributes of 4 for body, 2 for mind, 3 for soul. They're a Stormcast Eternal for a species. Their core skill, so what you will always get an extra dice in, is weapon skill. They then have a further 7 XP to spend across the board, strengthening and focusing their skills to be that the player wants this player character to be. They then have a core talent, so heroic challenge, and you would go through the book and you'd find what heroic talent is, and that would be your core talent, one that always is on your page because that is who you are. You then get a choice of other talents that are in line with the spirit of the character, and then you get equipment and your finances effectively in Aqua Guaranis. Mentioned before about the ladder. So when you sort of rate yourself as you move through hitting your opponent, as indicated on the screen, you can go from poor to extraordinary. And depending on where you are on this ladder and where your opponent is on this ladder, depends on that difficulty number. If you're the same, then that difficulty number is a 4 to 1. If they are better, then that increases to a 5. If you are better, that decreases to a 3. In broad terms, and it steps up and down depending on if you are 2 steps or 1 step, or whichever way that swing goes, to sort of roll the dice pool, analyze the numbers, pick them out, that's your damage, and you move on. This is the GM screen, so it has all the armor traits, it has the various conditions you can come under, the flow of the battle, environmental traits, so how does the world around you affect what is going on? Are things obscured? Are things hazards? and how that affects roles and the environment. So there's the ladder, how to use soulfire, how to make an attack, how to use metal, what it means, the ladder with respect to sort of striking an opponent for difficulty, how to deal damage, how to take wounds, what you can do, what happens when you get mortally wounded or have to make death tests. Something you can do, which is make a last stand. If you are ready to give up on that character effectively or let that character go, you can make a heroic last stand. And that gives you mechanical benefits, but on completion of those actions, that character is no more. How to use speed, how to use other movement, what means by resting and range and size, common skill combinations, what advantage and disadvantage means, how to scale a quick and easy difficulty scale if something you are running either isn't presented in the core adventure book or the core rule book, for example, how to work it out so it's fair, effectively. And then what advantage, disadvantage mean. So I've already shown you the reverse, the player facing side with the beautiful artwork on it. But what if a special sword given to you in Sigmarite for your Stormcast Eternal, or a bow presented to you by your Sylvaneth kin isn't enough? Well, Articles of Power. It is arcane loot, effectively. Now, the game is balanced that you are already powerful enough, but these can provide those MacGuffins, if you want them, to sort of throw in amongst your game, either because they will upset the balance of the world, or because they're just damn cool. And you want to include them because in each of the books there are some amazing weapons and tools and equipment available to be introduced. So there's some really good ones in here. So if you want to expand on the already powerful nature of the Soulbound setting, then Articles of Power is one to pick up. But what if you're moving through the world and need to find people, or people have been lost? Then Refugees of the Realms. These are adventure hooks and creatures for you to find, drop in, and sort of, if you want to use that travel to be meaningful, then you can have them come across some of these refugees, and it's separated out per realm. It's really useful. Through Fire and Smoke is all about hazards, and again, what it means to be in a certain realm's hazards, and what doom does to those hazards, and how it can amplify the effects, and really sort of twist the world in this sort of post-Necroquake Age of Sigmar setting, trying to sort of equalize out in one way or another. Steam and Steel, if you want to take to the skies in ships like the Grund, which we'll get to in a little bit, or you want to face down against flying weapons or airborne privateers, or just want some, poisons, which is a weapon of choice for certain player characters, then Steam and Steel is a definite choice for you. Era of the Beast. Now this moves the story on. So we're getting into story. So the core rulebook. The core rulebook shows so much information, but it encapsulates a little bit of the past and a little bit of the future. But what if we push beyond that? That's sort of the here and now of the setting. Whereas Era of the Beast moves that setting on. What happens when Kragnus is released from their prison? And again, if you're not sure who that is, the book really sort of drives in and explains why that's a bad thing. And there are other ramifications in the book about moving the story on with respect to Marathi and Anvilgard and so on and so forth. So we'll not delve too much into that now. That's a video for another time. But if you want to move the story on and really sort of bring around the beasts with new enemies and new archetypes, then this is a book for you. Now we're moving into the adventure modules, broken down into short, sharp adventures that tie together, but not necessarily have to be run in a specific sequence. If you just cherry pick one out because your player characters, the party, the Soulbound group stop there for a period of time, then pick this up. Shadows in the Mist, Shroud Adventured, Secrets of Avant-Garde, and it has lots of nuance and underground dealings and the opportunity to add in subterfuge and politics to a game all about heavy hitting, swords clashing, spell slinging. What happens to the world outside of Avant-Garde with its sort of where the nature is trying to rake it back in and take it over again. And there are political and devious individuals at work in the background. Maybe you want to explore the industrial city of Greywater Fastness, where so much of the war machines of this setting, this era, are created. And again, being attacked from various sides by various parties, both external and internal, with new ideas, new options, settings. You can see some of the recurring character art of people that have featured on numerous covers. The gentleman at the back with the hammer is this guy here. Okay, so there is continuity. If you want to go from Faltering Light into the Blackened Earth with your party, you don't have to use the pre-gens, but they are there, they are presented, and all these new ideas and new options. Then Blackened Earth is definitely an option for you. Crash and Burn, probably the best thing I've read and are excited to run for a group, is totally free. You could go on the Cubicle website, Cubicle 7 website, and download this right now for free. It is a little bit of a tearjerker, really. It's got some big set pieces and some high stakes action. If you want to know what happens when an airship drops out the sky, then this adventure is for you, and the ramifications of what's happening in and around the world on what would ordinarily be a simple escort mission from point A to point B. Crash and Burn is brilliant to run. Faltering Light, I've shown you the book, again comes in the starter set. Bright Spear, and that leads into things like Game Master Screen, which has additional ideas of what you can run in the various cities, some of which have been mentioned in the books and some of which will be mentioned in future books. If you want horror, if you want low-level horror, you want the same framework, but you want it to feel more visceral, darker, grim-dark. This is where Cubicle 7 are sort of leaning into their next book and what we'll be getting to soon. Vosheim's Holdouts is all about Radikar taking over Ulfenkhan, and you play humans at a low level that have to survive the night. It's somewhere between Night of the Living Dead, Assault on Precinct 13, and Resident Evil meets Underworld, I guess, with it all coming together and sort of clashing in this close, confined space of a mansion. It's a lot of fun, and one that you can run for the horror preferring players, or those that want a more sort of spoopy adventure around the Halloween sort of time. You can run this with full power heroes, but the experience is different. It goes from being holding out for the night and hoping you survive to then taking the fight external to the walls and into Ulfenkhan. That's a way you can spin this if you don't want a weakened party in this setting. Mentioned the Grund before. So the Grund, the ship, is sort of picked up in a few adventures, mentioned in a few places across the setting. It is a special ship, and this operations manual supports it. And there's a map that you can use with it. There is a crew that they built out for it. So it's all in there for you to sort of enjoy the airship side of things. If you want to take a more aeronautical approach to your Age of Sigmar Soulbound games. So that's what is out now. What Cubicle 7 are working on next is Ulfenkarn, City at the Edge of Death. We've already seen Radikar and Vosholm's Holdout. This is where they're going next. Into Ulfenkarn, the City of Death. This is where the grim dark side of the game comes out. Again, you can run it with a full strength binding, or you can really lean into this and be survivors in Shyish, working and hiding and moving through, avoiding Radikar and avoiding the forces of chaos and the forces of everybody, really. So, and it goes into this whole great look at that artwork. So this is one of the books I'm excited to pick up next. So this is on the Cubicle 7 blog. Hopefully, if you're watching this and it comes out, you feel excited about picking this up, because I certainly am. So that sort of covers sort of Soulbound in its many facets, what's available now, what's available in the future, and how you can use each of those releases to really sort of bring the story to life. If you've wanted to run a high power, high fantasy game and the D20 systems or the Power by Apocalypse systems don't sit with you, and you like Warhammer, and even if you don't, then Warhammer Age of Sigmar Soulbound by Cubicle 7 is the answer. So thank you for watching. Please hit that like and subscribe and notification bell so you know when we're sort of bringing out more information. There'll be links down to Cubicle 7's website down in the description below. I've had the pleasure of speaking to Chris Hanley, who's written on some of the Cubicle 7 products, Elaine Lithgow, who has written on a number of their different products. So go and check out my interviews with them, those fantastic content creators. Go and check out Cubicle 7 and see what is out there for you to enjoy and embrace. I said you were bound to love it, and I hope that's true. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Adam. This is Fly Like a D6. Goodbye.